Now here is a tip with the zip pocket on the outer back panel. Now you'll see I've sewn the zip pocket lining to the main back outer panel and cut into the letterbox like normal. You'll notice there will be a lot of bulk foam that is in the seam allowance within the letterbox. So here's how I get rid of the bulk. I flip it over so the foam is facing up. Get your scissors and trim the seam allowance back. Only the foam though, by 1/8, making sure you do not cut into your sewn lines around the letterbox. Now you've done that, pass the pocket lining through the letterbox and carry on making the zip pocket as you did like before. Here I'm showing what the main outer back panel will look like with your zip pocket. Also, I'm showing you that I've sewn all 3 sides of my lining of the pocket. Now it's complete, pop this to one side. Moving on to your lining slip pocket, get your lining pattern piece C. Fold it in half, short edge to short edge, and give it a good fold and finger press. Pin the 2 sides and the bottom edge, making sure all the edge matches each other. So, we are going to sew from the folded edge down one side to the mark I have made on the bottom edge, and repeat this for the other side. I have left a 5-inch gap at the bottom as an opening for the next step. When sewing, make sure you backstitch at the start and at the end of your sewn lines. I'm using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I've now sewn to those marks I've made. I trim away the excess seam allowance, making sure you do not cut into your sewn lines. I trimmed mine back 1/8 of an inch away from the sewn line. Trim the corners. Now you've trimmed it back, that gap we left will be how we turn it the right way out. I'm using a pokey tool to make sure my corners all turn out neatly. Now tuck that seam allowance up inside the slip pocket and give it a good old press with the iron. We will close the gap in a short while. Now it's pressed, we need to top stitch along the top edge. I do this 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, using a 3.5 or a 4 stitch length on your machine. Now get your panel A lining which doesn't have the zip pocket on. You'll need to fold this panel in half, giving it a good finger press so there is a centre crease, and repeat this process on the slip pocket too. With your rule, measure up 4.5 inches from the bottom edge. Line the slip pocket to the edge of that rule and match up the centre creases on both panels. Pin it into place. So now you can either sew all 3 sides to make one slip pocket, or to make 2 slip pockets, sew all 3 sides and sew down the centre. You'll do the sewn line 1/8 of an inch along the sides and the bottom edge of the slip pocket. Optional extra, if you want to add a woven label to your lining, this is the time to do it now. Or you can wait like I am to put the woven label on the outside. Now you've sewn the slip pocket onto the lining, pop it to one side. Add in the magnetic snap to your lining. Get some scrap foam and your washers from your snaps. Cut the foam in half and draw 2 lines through the washer on the foam. Repeat this for the second piece. Pop this to one side. Get your first lining panel and flip it over so the wrong side is facing up. Find the centre mark on the top edge and, using the centre crease, measure down 1.5 inches and make a mark. Grab your first washer and line the centre hole to the mark you've just made and draw those 2 lines either side. With a craft knife, cut those 2 lines. Grab one piece of foam which has the marking on and cut those 2 lines with a knife too. Now flip the panel over and put some fray check on the 2 holes you have made on your lining panel. Grabbing the half of your magnetic snap, push the magnetic snap prongs through those holes on the lining from the right side of your fabric. Flip the panel over and now push that foam over the two prongs going through the two holes. I had to trim down my foam as it was a little bit too big. Grab the washer and put that onto the prongs. Now the prongs need to be bent in either facing inwards or outwards. I now use a bit of gaffer tape to cover my magnetic snap back. Now you'll need to repeat the same process for the second lining panel. Now you will have both parts of the magnetic snap into place on both lining pieces. Snap them together and making sure all the edges of your lining match. Moving on to the darts for the lining. Taking your lining panels, we need to pin all 4 darts so both lines meet each other. So a normal stitch length and reverse stitch at the start and at the end. Do this for all 4 darts. Now you have sewn all 4 darts. This part isn't in the pattern, but I trim half of my excess away and open up the seams by giving them a good finger press. This will help with the bulk. We need to complete the lining of this bag. Undo that zip pocket. This is important. So, we snap the magnetic snaps together, putting the panels right side to right side. You will need to push one panel's darts the opposite way, so both panels naturally fit together. Grab your clips or pins. Now match up those darts on the bottom of the panel and clip into place. Then go all the way round, putting those clips on. This will stop the panel moving around when we sew it together. Once you've pinned it or clipped it all the way around, we need to do some measuring now on the one side. Measure down 1 inch from the top edge. Make a mark. Repeat this on the other side and make a mark. I've also included in my marks my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we sew the normal seam allowance from the top edge down to the first mark, then taper in so the seam allowance ends up being 3/4 of an inch. So 3/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way around the sides and the bottom, and when you're coming up to that last mark, taper back to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure you lock those stitches at the start and at the end of your sewn lines. Now you've sewn all the way around, you'll need to trim back your seam allowance by half. Now you've done this, your lining is complete. Pop it to one side.